turn to chart 5.7 and take a look at housing starts. Once again, make sure you look at the data seasonally adjusted at an annual rate. It's very important. And, these are good data because they are in physical units. There's no inflation. And we're looking at housing starts, not completions. And so it makes them a good leading indicator. In the old economy, you can see how housing starts fluctuated violently with the cycle. That boom in the early 70s, that collapse with high inflation and high interest rates in the middle of the decade, another surge as interest rates fell with inflation, and then another collapse as consumer confidence fell with rising interest rates, spurred on by rising inflation. Sometimes credit conditions can become quite peculiar, as with the savings and loan crisis in the late 80s and early 90s. This wasn't just due to rising interest rates accompanying rising inflation. There really wasn't much. But still, you can see trouble in the credit markets, trouble in the mortgage markets, depressed housing starts. And then you can see this long upswing. Here we have housing starts. Here we have got housing starts in the late 90s up to 1.5 million, seasonally adjusted annual rate. Now you might say, well, Mike, but nothing compared to what was going on in the early 70s. So housing starts might have been strong in the late 90s, but not as strong as in the early 70s. That's true. However, a little background is useful here. Housing starts refer to just units started, and that includes apartments as well as single-family homes. So a 10,000 square foot mansion counts as a single unit when work is begun. An apartment house of 10 units, which is in total 10,000 square feet, counts as 10 starts. In the early 70s, apartment construction was unusually strong because of federal subsidies. So to some extent, the figures are really not comparable. And when we turn shortly to new home sales, we'll take a look at a statistics which represents single-family homes only. But you can definitely see here the effect of the falling interest rates. This is really interesting. Despite the recession, despite the downturn in consumer confidence, look what happens to new housing starts. They surge upward, hit the 2 million level. All of this since the recession of 2001, spurred on by low mortgage rates. And then, very interestingly, although rates rose a little, look at this downturn. Really ominous. And this is the real estate bubble which people began to talk about in the middle of the decade. This is not so much brought on by high interest rates as it was mostly by speculation. In other words, what had driven so much of the construction was speculation that home prices would continue to rise very, very rapidly as they had in the first part of the decade. And then when the air began to leak out of the bubble and the home prices stopped appreciating and the speculation subsided, and as demand fell, you can see the housing starts began to fall. Keep your attention tuned to this figure. It's quite important. Think of the cluster of industries that are associated with housing starts. All those building materials, lumber, concrete, glass, plumbing supplies, everything. And then think of all that stuff that goes into the new homes, from the air conditioning to the heating, to the refrigerators and the dishwashers and the washing machines, all those new carpets, the furniture and furnishings. There's a lot involved in this industry. It really merits your continued close attention. If this figure continues to fall, if we get a figure as low once again as 1 million, as we had in 1990, that could be a serious drag upon the economy. Let's turn now and to look at some of the other housing data.